we kept the most difficult question until the end. If we know what works, why don't we do more of it? And what can we change? So we're going to see that with our panelists that are already seated. And this session will be moderated by Sam Muller.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start with a very famous poet or seer from Africa who lived, I think, about 2,000 years ago. I forget his name, but he said something like, "When justice fails, the world shakes. When justice fails, families suffer. When justice fails, dreams can come to dust." And that's really how we start this panel. And I tried to make this very practical in a conversation with my daughter a few days ago. Next week, she's going to the municipality for her marriage. She's getting married, and they need to do this formal thing. And I explained to her, you know, my dear, without a justice system, you wouldn't be able to do this. By simply, you know, going to the municipality, and for her, it's a boring thing she had to do. But that's how invisible I think justice is. That you know, a 29-year-old in the Netherlands has no idea what's behind the simple fact of getting married and all the justice infrastructure that is behind that. She gets to register it. If she has a dispute, there's somewhere she can go. If there's issues, they know how to do it, etc., etc. And of course, that justice infrastructure, as we've seen in this conference, is a bit broken and a bit rotten and not really always there. And we've done a problem analysis with this excellent first panel. We've looked at what users need, and I think we learned that users are people, that scaling is people, that everything begins and ends with people. We've seen what works. We've seen great examples, very concrete examples of what works in the previous panel. And now the question is, why is it not scaling massively? And we have 4 perspectives through which we look at that question. And they all have something to add to this scaling question. And after Michael's presentation, I realized we forgot one. So let's kind of keep that 5th actor in the room somehow. But the 4 perspectives are, first, the government. There's no way you can scale something, if at least I've learned, without in some way having ownership of the government. That is critical. Whether you like them or not, they are there and they have an important role. The second is the perspective of the, the perspective of the government here is presented by Alison, who at very short notice was kind enough to take the place of Minister Sesay, who couldn't make it because of an infrastructure issue with his plane in Freetown. So the government is one. The second is the perspective of the bilateral donor, or one government giving support to another government, which is represented by Andrew Solomon, who's been in that business for a long time, and a few people know more about that than he does. The third perspective is that of the multilateral development bank that do lots of business, lots of deals, grants, loans, and whatever with governments. And Holly Burduja is with us. She does that in, I guess, what we would call Eastern Europe at the moment. And the fourth perspective is that of philanthropy, presented by Mahir. But Mahir made it quite clear that the organization he represents, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, is a very specific type of philanthropist, not the typical, I suppose, when we think of philanthropy, we think of Bill Gates or whatever. The German foundations are slightly different, but it's kind of a symbol or a metaphor for a group of funders that are not either of the two, that have usually a little more freedom to choose what they fund. And I guess the fifth one, which we didn't really think of, but which Michael, because it's so new, is business and our venture capitalists. Maybe they have a role somewhere to play as well. So maybe I could ask you if you have any thoughts on those, only if, and also the room, if we have a discussion later, you may talk about this. But I think Michael with Contend is one of the few first examples, trailblazers in getting venture capital involved. Now, what we'd like to do is 2 rounds of questions, and then after that, engage you in the discussion so that we can get a better sense of why are we not scaling. So I'd like to start by asking you, Alison, as a former AG, representative of government, what you think are the key factors that governments bring to the scaling challenge that we face?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for the opportunity to be here again with another very esteemed panel. I'll talk a little bit about the challenges faced by ministers of justice and CJs. First of all, we need to integrate rather than work in silos. So the justice system is complex, many actors, the courts, the police, legal aid providers, traditional leaders, etc. They don't traditionally collaborate and frequently have different interests and prioritize. And reforming just even a little bit can sometimes take years. We also have to make it politically attractive, or the Minister of Justice, as I used the word sexy earlier on, it's very different from being a Minister of Finance or a Minister of Tourism. Justice is not always a vote winner. And so we don't get the budget that we need to make the kinds of changes that we need to make. We also have to get data to make the investment case to support initiatives such as legal aid, community-based justice services. These require sustained investment. But justice budgets traditionally support bricks and mortar, more courts, more prisons. And despite the growing evidence that justice improves the livelihood and health and trust in institutions, it still isn't recognized as foundational to development, unlike health or education. And so it's harder for us to prioritize budget allocation to justice. I spoke about the need to get data because, again, without strong data, we can't argue for prioritizing allocation in a national budget to support justice. It's a little esoteric. It's like we take utilities for granted until we don't have electricity. So we take justice for granted until we don't have it. We need to better connect to people. Justice is seen to be designed for professionals, as opposed to for ordinary people. So lawyers and judges frequently resist changes to process because it affects our status and opposition, to put it very bluntly. And of course, there's the bureaucracy surrounding process. That bureaucracy is also very, very difficult to change. We also have to build ownership, have our people feel that they own it. And when we see that kind of bottom-up thrust supported by data, I think that also helps to bring funding. After all, as a former politician, I can say politicians don't run away from votes. And then also, finally, there's this political cycle. Every 4 years or 5 years, governments change, frequently ministers of justice change, and unfortunately, or sometimes fortunately, the incoming minister just gets rid of everything that was done before, so we go right back to the beginning again. So that's challenging. I've already spoken in the last panel about the Swift Justice Initiative that we brought about in the Bahamas, and how when different actors who don't normally come together, did work together, not in silos, worked collaboratively, what a difference it made in the criminal justice system. And it sent a very clear message about the the policymakers' view about the rule of law and safety and the result of safety, people feeling very good about investment in our community as well. And so I think that it also led to the realization and the recognition that when justice actors work appropriately together, not in silos, rather than weakening the rule of law or affecting adversely the independence of the judiciary, actually the strengthening of systems, the confidence building in systems, enhanced democracy, enhanced belief in the rule of law, and took away cynicism about our system. So I think that if we are able to focus on these things that we need to do, and the things that I've shown you did work, like the family court, like the swift justice system, we see that actually things can work.
Thank you, Alison. So I see, you say government needs to bring it together, bring the groups, bring the institutions together, sell it politically, make the investment case, connect it to people and ensure there's ownership, manage the bureaucracy, and I don't know how to put that, but in the difficult cycles, make sure there's irreversible change in a way, that it continues beyond your predecessor.
If possible.
What of these things, when you were AG, would you have needed most help with? What were things, if you look at these 5 things or any other things that you thought, oh my God, if I would have had some help with this, it would have gone much better?
Data.
We
had to start, we were speaking anecdotally, and so we had to start from scratch with data. Had we had the data hitting the ground, there would have been able to make a much, much stronger case for the allocation of resources. I mean, those who have to work with governments know that at budget time, there's always the fight for the allocation. And so if there was the data, and the data also enables the public information campaign so that people can support also data, how they are affected. You can get them in, get them to own, and not anecdotal anymore. We're speaking and showing concrete evidence. It makes a big difference.
That's very valuable. So let's hold on to that data, and with that, without that data, you can't make the case properly. Without that data, you can't really build the ownership that you need.
It's much more difficult.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Well, let's turn now to another actor, the multilateral donor, Holly. What would you say? What would you bring? What could you bring to the not you personally, but as a multilateral donor to the challenge of scaling, and what would you need to deliver that?
Yeah. So first off, I'm really honored to be here and really inspired from all the remarks and ideas and success stories and also challenges that have been discussed today. So thank you for having us, speaking on behalf of the bank. So in a way, I kind of get to cheat on this question, or it's kind of a softball question for me because we are a bank. So one of the biggest challenges is lack of money for scaling. So the first thing we can contribute is financing and mobilizing capital. Justice sector spending tends to go primarily to salaries. I mean, this is what we've seen in the data, right? So 80–90% of budgets go to salaries, sometimes more. So that leaves very little for innovation, for capital investment, for awareness programs, et cetera. So financing is really essential, and as you were saying, especially now in constrained fiscal environments, every penny counts and is fought for. So having partners like the World Bank and other development banks can offer funds, especially in low-income countries. We can offer, low interest to no interest loans, and we lend also in middle and high-income countries in certain cases. But we can also help unlock funding and help get additional funding from other partners. So this is one specific area where we can help, and with our loans, traditionally in the past there were financing courts financing the procurement of ICT equipment, but now there's also been a shift to have more institutional components to come along with those and to introduce even, we have more recent programs that have specific components on people-centered justice. So we're pushing to make it not only about building courts, but also about unlocking access to justice through what we call softer reforms and softer investments. So we are a bank, but we are also a knowledge bank. So I think knowledge and technical expertise is something else that we bring. And this is through analytical work that we do, through various instruments, through grants, through trust funds, through reimbursable advisory services. This is how we can help governments understand their challenges, understand bottlenecks, understand where they need to focus their efforts. We also have policy frameworks and analytical frameworks. We have a global unit that works on justice, and they've come up with a new tool which has been piloted in several countries. I think the pilot in Kenya is about to be completed. It's called Jupiter, and it looks at the justice sector, whole and justice institutions, and makes recommendations on how this can be improved. We're also developing a methodology for assessing digital readiness of justice institutions that will be piloted shortly and hopefully be published later this year. So these are tools that can be used. They can provide frameworks, but can also be tailored. And this can kind of help. It can help scale in a way that is more cost effective. Right, so it's not making every single country and jurisdiction has its own unique challenges and problems, but there are some cross-cutting themes. And so if we can develop and share these methodologies that look at these different themes, then if you identify that X, Y, and Z are your main challenges, then you can look at the other country examples and take lessons learned from what others have done and apply those solutions without having to reinvent the wheel every time. So this is something else I think we offer. And then knowledge sharing and knowledge exchanges, facilitating peer-to-peer exchanges. And this is kind of going into what I think our third main contribution is, which is partnerships and collaboration, our convening power. And this is done at a global level with various institutions bringing together global institutions and governments like we did at the Global Justice and Rule of Law Forum last year. But this is also done at a country level. So we engage with justice sectors, and justice sectors, as we all know, are very complex, right? So many institutions, not only multiple institutions, multiple branches of government, right? So you have ministries of justice or departments of justice, and you have the courts, the prosecutors, you have lawyers, bailiffs, civil societies, and then of course, other justice users and the public. So it's quite complex, and we've seen it in a lot of our analytical support and advisory work. When we've had workshops, we've had people come to us and say, this is the first time that we've had a chance to discuss this issue together with the Ministry of Justice, the courts, and the prosecutors, or this is the first time that the Bar Association has been invited to these kinds of conversations. So the bank is often viewed as a neutral third party. So this is another way we can. I think I've exceeded my time, and I didn't go into my requirements to support this, but I will just be very quick, which is data. Like 100% data is really, really needed. Quality data. And the other one that I would put there is champions. So identified champions, government level, at other institutions, but that champions that have the mandate, both from a legal perspective and in terms of authority with those they work with, and who have capacity.
Thank you. So what I'm picking up is, the mobilizing of capital, whether in loans or grants or whatever, the knowledge, and I think I would really recognize that the kind of assessment frameworks that enable scale. So you can customize, but there are certain things. I think OECD does that really well as well. I think these are the two organizations that do that very, very well, which allows scale, and the last one is convening power. Can I just ask you one question on what would you need as a bank, or what do you need more of as a bank to really unleash your loan capacity for justice, because it still doesn't happen a lot, as far as I know. There's not that many countries that that ask for loans. Not many ministers of justice I talk to know how to go about it, to present a good case to their Minister of Finance to ask for a loan. Any thoughts there?
So I don't want to be repetitive, but I'm going to say data.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think if the challenges are identified, and not only data on the challenges, but data on justice outcomes and what has been successful to show that this really does have an impact, and it impacts at a more global scale. So not just anecdotal data, which is also very helpful, but also to see how positive justice reforms impact economic growth, for example. And this is actually something that my colleagues at the Global Unit are working on, is an analysis of this. Because there's always, what is our return on investment, and what is the political incentive, right? Because they're frequently changing, and they need to see the benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. Thanks a lot. Okay, let's now turn to philanthropy, and Mahir, we agreed you define it as you define it. The German organizations like CAS are a slightly particular form of philanthropy, but what we're generally talking about is a category that is a little freer in the way it could spend its money, not necessarily tied to a government very strictly, and can usually be used in a more flexible way. What could you offer to the scaling question?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all here. Unfortunately, contrary to what my colleague has to offer to the region, we don't have so much money. So we are not putting so much money at the table. What we are offering the region is basically building bridges and networks that are value-based. And let me explain it on an example of how we are working in the Southeast European region, where I'm living and working also. The thing is that you can have two approaches basically to the scaling the justice in the region. You can have the top-down approach, which is mostly represented by government and intergovernmental organizations. They have big money, they have big structures and everything else, and they try to pull a lot of infrastructure and knowledge and expert knowledge in the system and money. And to the channel through the formal legal system, through the rule of law, they are trying to bring about justice to the people in the region. Basically, that has some merits, of course, but you can also have the other way around, so basically starting from the bottom up. There is, of course, as we also stated, there is no way around governments and the formal judicial system and the formal legal systems in this way. So in one or other way, you have to work with this and with this system. What we realized in the region is that since we have a good foundation, a good standing in the region, and we are well known for our networks and door openers, so we are using our networks in the sense that we are bringing all the stakeholders to the table. And since you mentioned also, we are quite flexible in our work, so we don't have like the intergovernmental organizations and international organizations, these constraints, so we can be quite flexible and to a degree also creative in our work. And one example of this creativity and how we are building bridges is that we call it a flagship project. It's also called labeled a little bit. It's gigantic, like Leaders for Justice, it's called. And this program or project started 16 years ago in Romania, and now we replicated it also to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to Moldova. So we have 3 programs that are sister programs in this sense. And what we are doing basically, we are working with the government, with the formal legal system, but we are giving some input from the NGO sector and doing it from the bottom up. So We are inviting NGOs and the civil sector to participate in this project, and also young lawyers from who are already in the justice system, but not appointed judges or prosecutors, but they are in training. And we are trying to work with them and what are the needs of the society as a general. And we are trying to work with these future leaders in the justice system, since we realize that it is not sustainable just to make the top-down approach, because it's not sustainable in the long shot. And we are trying to make it local ownership. So we are trying to input some local ownership, and that the people who are going in the formal justice system, realize why they are doing this. They are not there for legal procedures. Okay, legal procedures are important for us lawyers, of course, but what's the output? And output is justice. And we are forgetting also when we are going from the approach, a top-down approach, which is also one of the facilitators and sponsors, the big donors is the EU, that you are just putting only rules, procedures in the system and trying then to get the output. But all statistics in the region show that the people are not satisfied with the justice output. And what is the reason for this? The reason is that we are forgetting in this system that the rule of law system is only one machinery, I would say, that is producing the output. In ideal terms, it would be justice. But we are forgetting the input.
Yep.
The input is the society, the cultural values, also we're forgetting history, the experiences, and so you have, in the Balkans especially, you have informal institutions which avoid the formal institutions because there is a lack of trust. And it is only going when you to work that we are putting together the formal system and the informal system together in the civil society, and to tell them, okay, these are the future leaders who will foster justice in the right way through the rule of law instruments. So this is our approach.
Fantastic. Wow. So this is an example of creativity and, I suppose, literally building bridges between formal and informal, which is typically something that philanthropy could do much easier than the government. Andrew, over to you. In your experience as a bilateral donor, what could you do bring to the scaling challenge?
Sure. Thanks for including me. Happy to be here for a donor perspective. I have to say, though, almost every key point I intended to make has been made today in some form or another, including just now. But I endeavor to persevere. I also want to say, I know time sensitive, that the last time I was in this in the Peace Palace was 6 years ago for the launch of the Pathfinders Task Force report and the Hague Declaration. That came at a critical time to energize rule of law, justice reforms around the world, and in a little bit more self-interested way, people-centered justice, and that approach with the data and everything gave me, in my bilateral donor, the tool I needed to re-elevate rule of law, which had really become too hard. How do we measure it? And it was in danger. So 6 years later, I think as showcased today, we have in place the data, the tools, the frameworks, and the people to spark, if not scale, people-centered justice innovations around the world. And also looking back 6 years, we saw the COVID pandemic was a game changer, not necessarily in a positive sense, but it did necessitate the innovation in our space to meet the moment. And fast forward to this moment, what's the other game changer that we're dealing with? It is, and we have the OECD findings, data that show the downward decline of so-called overseas development assistance, and even its disruption. Which again, we are now, everyone here is now again forced to meet this moment, how we work, how we innovate. So this, again, is a timely meeting, and I'm glad to be here. All right, now I'll try to get to your questions, but first, what can bilaterals do to initiate or scale innovation? Well, first of all, it requires justice to be prioritized as a donor priority. And as I alluded to earlier, it's not always the case, and increasingly may not be the case moving forward. So again, that's why we have to make the business case to have the value proposition. It's self-evident for most of us in this room why what we do matters, but it isn't to that Minister of Finance and to others. So it has to be a priority. Let's just assume it is a priority for donors. What can we do in this new environment to continue to make important contributions to innovating and taking it to scale? All right, funding is the obvious one in most cases, and I'll come back to that. But the three other ones come to mind, and here's certain a spin on similar themes. First, bilateral donors, I think, can indeed catalyze stakeholders and build coalitions to innovate. It can facilitate the cross-sectoral collaboration required to scale it. And then we can invest in the open learning ecosystems to do it better and maybe even to replicate it. So first on catalyzing, we know the evidence and our experience suggests that, as we heard earlier, a variety of institutions and actors are required to reform, to innovate, and to scale. Donors can help catalyze that, and we can help bring together the people to define the problem, to ideate, to prototype, and to test the innovative solution. So that's my legal design thinking and human-centered design hat on. And the cuts notwithstanding, I do think donors have the relationships, long-standing relationships with both the justice sector actors and those in the technology and innovation space to bring them together and facilitate, ultimately, ownership over this innovation. Relatedly, I think the cross-sectoral collaboration, as has been alluded to here, is something that bilateral donors can do, particularly those donors that are also, they're the development agencies, which have both the internal expertise and the partners in other sectors, in the health sector and other public sectors. So we can bring those together to facilitate that collaboration to scale. In many ways, by co-locating the services. So we heard about medical legal partnerships, working with local governments in the justice sector to take things to scale. And then lastly, well, not last, but almost last, on the open learning. Even with the resource constraints, which are real for many bilaterals, I think still targeted investments in the R&D, the research and development for the justice sector, is still a very necessary role. So generating the data and evidence, supporting the evaluations of innovation and good reforms, and to support those shared learning and problem-solving networks and activities to scale justice. And then lastly, on the financing. But just like we have to be more innovative in how we design and build scaling into our design, which I've failed to do multiple times, I think bilateral funding also needs to be way more innovative, way more flexible, and way more inclusive. So, like we see in other development sectors, more pooled donor funding. How do we really, do the blended public-private sector funding to scale justice? So I'll just leave it there. We have to up our game, no doubt.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, a lot of the same themes, although investing in open learning's ecosystem, I find a very interesting one. Yeah, we hadn't picked that one up. So you mentioned meeting the moment, and I'm also looking at the time, and I'd like to have room for an audience question. But maybe briefly, a quick one or 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute. But can you name 1 or 2 challenges that you see in the next, 5 years in meeting those challenges? So there is what you can offer, but what are some of the challenges that you see and how we might meet them very quickly? Alison, Holly, Mahir, and Andrew.
I'm going to do one challenge and one opportunity.
Yeah.
The challenge is to continue every effort to make sure that we get rid of siloing and that we work together. It's really important that to show how the dollar can stretch if we actually work in a cross-sectoral way, and it strengthens. There's no aspect of society that is not touched by justice. So I do think that it's important to take away siloing and keep on pressing that. And then the opportunity that I see is most of us in here remember when we had to book an airline flight by going to a travel agent. Now we take Expedia for granted. We remember with horror the idea that you could actually get transportation online. Uber doesn't have any bricks and mortar. It's all here. I look forward to the day when because we have AI, we have technology, we can have that same experience for justice problems where people can just go online and certain types of problems can be resolved that way. In the same way that Expedia and booking online and special planning on trips is unheard of 15 years ago. I don't think this is far-fetched. I think that if you can imagine it, it can be done. And I'm looking forward to that kind of an opportunity when people really can have specific solutions to their problems in the palm of their hand.
Thank you. Ollie.
Exactly what she said.
That's great. There's alignment.
I think you really touched on most of the main points that I had put in my notes too. I think the biggest challenge, risk for putting all of these things together and scaling is a lack of a common vision for justice as a global public good. So we talked at the beginning about what is justice, what is the justice problem, let's define this. And it's clear that there are so many different ways that you can define it. But I think fundamentally, I think and I hope everyone in this room agrees that the goal is for it to be a global public good. It's a right and a good, and it's something that everyone should have access to. And right now, even institutions that should be pushing this, we're still somehow not there. And I don't know if I gave you this example when we spoke on the phone, but I recently co-authored a blog on people-centered justice, and it was published. We had, the World Bank is a nice bureaucracy, so we had several rounds of clearances, and we had the communications team suggesting some images to accompany the blog. What images did we get? And this is a blog. In the title, it says, People-Centered Justice Pathway to All, Pathway for All, or something like this. We got the scales. We got Lady Justice with the blindfold. We got a very serious-looking building, right? And so we had several back and forth exchanges on the image. I said, no, I want people thriving in society. They said, yes, but this is about justice. Yes, that is justice, right? Somebody said earlier that it's being able to realize the rights that the law provides for you, to live in a prosperous society. So I think even those of us who are implicated, who are deeply involved in this, we still need to find ways to further push this narrative and have a common vision for justice as a global public good. So I would say that's the biggest risk and opportunity.
See that clear. Mahir, what do you see?
Looking at the Southeast European region, I would say that we have a problem, which is, I call it, wave of populism. Now, since in our work we are quite a lot depending on the goodwill for cooperation with governments, And we are seeing now in our region that there is a wave of populist politicians coming into power. It's not only in our region, but it's a global phenomenon, unfortunately. And our fear is that these new politicians, if they grab the power, will come back to the concept of rule by law, not rule of law. And this would hinder our work quite essentially and could destroy our networks in this sense, value-based, and shift to another paradigm that we had 30 years ago. So it would destroy everything we built up there. But of course, I hope that, and this is especially also for the Europeans and the Western world important, as a message, and the Southeast European is maybe a good testing ground, that if you don't stick to your values and don't push for your values and enforce your values in a positive way, this void will be filled in by other actors who maybe not represent the same values we are representing here. So basically there is no void. There is only the choice between rule of law and rule by law. So we choose there. Yeah, thanks.
On that cheerful note, Andrew.
Yeah, so I know you asked me to talk about 5-year timelines, but frankly, I'm operating in a much shorter timeline, and I think it gets to the imperative, which I heard you use that term several times, and I do think we have a rule of law and justice imperative. And I used to have a boss that would say, the next 6 months are critical. And then he would say that again in the next 6 months after that. So again, in the more immediate term, I think we are looking at a loss of trust and partnerships that take very long time to build. With this abrupt, whether we're just not meeting our donor assistant commitments or we're terminating them immediately. Relatedly, I like to say, cutting programs is not just sort of like canceling the paper and the contracts. It's about canceling people in many ways. And so the other immediate thing that we are at risk of losing is the tremendous knowledge and expertise of thousands of people around the world, both international and national, who have develop the skills and expertise to reform, to innovate, to scale. So we have to find ways of mitigating that, building more organizations that are resilient, have learning really built into them and more resilient to these types of shocks. And then lastly, the other risk, I've heard of something called innovation theater. Has anybody else heard that term? I think donors are at risk, and others, of innovation theater. We're always saying, what are you doing to innovate? What are you doing to innovate? And we'll kind of try to package everything we do as innovation, but we're not really investing in the real change. So we have to guard against that. What do we mean by innovating? And what versus what may just be improvement? I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I won't try to summarize this, but some themes I'm picking up is the importance of the next 5 years, showcasing, really making the case, the cross-sectoral connections which are essential. I guess part of showcasing is maybe also this justice as a global public good. Just making that case. And yes, the real risk of populism. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's the elephant in the room, and how easy it is to how hard it is to build trust, how easy it is to lose that. And maybe we should keep that in mind. I think that's what you're saying, Andrew. Think about the next 6 months. Don't think, and keep thinking about the next 6 months. Don't think about the next 5 years. Any questions from the room on the scaling challenge? Udo.
So mine is more of a comment than a question. When you spoke, the Honorable Attorney General, you made the point about justice sector actors talking to each other, the importance of that collaboration. But I just want to expand that a little bit because I just returned from Niger, and what was clear is that when we talk about justice stakeholders, we need to expand that beyond the traditional stakeholders. So the projects we're doing in Niger is about land, for instance. and also about the fusion of the customary and the formal justice system. And we found out clearly that we needed, for instance, the Ministry of Interior to be part of that conversation, the Ministry of Land, the Ministry of Agriculture to be part of that conversation. And I think that when we think about scaling at the national level, our approach would be to bring all of these relevant stakeholders into the room, and even the Ministry of Planning, because these are the guys who command the purse. And if they don't understand what we're talking about, they will not release the money, and we can't scale. And the second thing I also wanted to mention is the issue of narrative. If there's something that we've done here today which I find really remarkable, is positioning justice as a value service for every other thing that happens in society. Is the kind of mindset that most governments don't understand. And if we begin to emphasize that kind of narrative and broaden our definition of justice stakeholders, maybe our scaling process might not be as difficult as it used to be in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Udo. Any other comments? I see Maurits, and I see that gentleman over there. Maurits, you first, and then over to that gentleman. Yeah.
Maurits Barendrecht. I've worked on R&D in access to justice for 25 years, and I'm still struggling with this scaling concept, because we talk local and global, and we want both of it. And the jurisdictions are like this, and if we want to respect every different community justice ideas, they're like this. And at the same time, we talk about the global language, global challenges, and if you talk about local like this, investors will run away because they will never put money in something that can only scale at this stage. And still, we want to be very respectful to every single community in the world that may have their own specific ideas and history. So I would like to have the perspective on the panel. Where are we on the scale between global and local?
Yes, shall I hand that back to the panel? Or maybe we do that one question and then you can think about it. So where are we on the scale global, local? And one more question there, then we'll...
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon. Mohamed Bangura, Residual Special Court for Sierra Leone. Question more about the dilemma that governments face, when they are in a situation for a loan from, say, the World Bank or a donor institution. And, I give a scenario. The situation oftentimes is a development loan is needed. A component of that loan would probably be for trying to work on the prison services, decongest the prisons, so that there's not too many people there who are not yet charged and who are waiting just in pretrial detention. So part of that loan is intended for that purpose. But then the loan, or maybe the World Bank says, well, you have to reform your laws. Certain laws are there that need reform before the loan is given. And say, for example, it may be women empowerment. It may be child labor laws. But then the question now is, where does the government stand? It's seeking loan to, free up itself in a tight situation with prison overload. And it's being pressured to reform laws also that perhaps need reform, but perhaps it's not a priority at that moment. How do you, is it really helping the scaling process? Is it an impediment to access to justice?
Thank you. We had one more question. Where was it? Yes, it was Roger. Yeah. Please.
Roger Khoure again, Justice Advisor at HiiL. So from my perspective, I think the number one enemy for scaling is resistance. and resistance of institution and people, and this is due to many factors. On the institution level, there is a lot of resistance coming from a lack of the political will or even corruption, and from the people as related to human nature of change and how we can confront this resistance on this levels. Thank you.
Clear. So 3 questions. I'm just looking at Tim. How much? Can you cut me some slack with one more question, or are you saying we'll do one more? Over there, Ian, please.
Sorry, I just had a very quick question around the economic model for scaling justice, particularly when it comes to the infrastructure required for scaling. When we, for example, talk about, in my country, for example, you've got 18 million businesses, right? And if you're talking about scaling justice or even conflict resolution for 18 million businesses, you need to be talking about at least 1 million mediators, 1 million arbitrators. And currently you don't even have up to, 3,000 actual judges, in the entire country. So what kind of frameworks are being developed to actually make sure that the infrastructure and the economic models for scaling justice actually exist before you can even talk about resistance or other barriers?
Great. Okay, that last question is almost a conference in and of itself, but fantastic, really great. So the 4 questions. 1, where are we on the scale between global and local? I think very much connected with that is the question, as it were, the will of the government versus the will of funders and how they want to do this. The issue of how do you overcome resistance from people and institutions, and what's the economic model for scale. And let's say we're not asking you to resolve all these questions and give the final answer, but any thoughts you can give to us that we can take with us in our notes from the conference and in possible next steps would be great. Alison.
I'd just like to focus a little bit on the first and the last questions. There's a tip on one of the other ones. I honestly don't know where we are in global or local, but I do think that we need to think differently and completely, not just out of the box, but out of the building. You said, for example, mediators and arbitrators with 18 million people. That's great. What better skill you want than that, to be able to service 18 million people? And I just think we have to think differently. And with AI, there must be certain types of problems that an algorithm, maybe you want on a contract, you want a resolution on a contract, or some simple stuff. And you can make it through writing your algorithm local. You can make it culturally relevant. So I think that these are opportunities that we should seize. And on the matter of you just speak for the World Bank for yourself, but I want to say that I like us, as we think differently and think of justice as the golden thread throughout our society, rather than we need a loan for the prison, dealing with people on remand, but we can't get it until we reform laws on domestic violence. Well, why can't we do both?
Yes, so I think your question was mostly directed at me. So first, I'll just say, in my experience in the countries I've worked in, I've heard our leadership say we don't finance building prisons. So just to put that there, but I don't know if that's true in every case or if it's only in the places I've worked. But we can replace it with anything. We can replace it with a court or something else. And I've also never been in a situation in my own experience where I've been told we won't do this unless they make this reform. Now we have helped governments push reforms by financing activities that would in our loans for that. But I will also say that we are a bank, we come with financing, but we also have to be strategic about how and what we are financing, and the funds are not unlimited as well. And we have a board that makes those determinations. So there may very well be cases where they say, well, yeah, we're not willing to do it because of this, and I kind of go with the same approach, which is, well, perhaps there's a way that you could get support to do more than one thing. From the World Bank perspective, we're not only offering loans, we also provide technical advice. We also have grants and trust funds and policy frameworks, and we've worked with several countries on how to reform legislation and how to get support and also manage change. I don't think that's a clear answer to your question, but I think it's the best that I can offer right now. But yeah, I think the best thing to do in these situations is to continue to have the conversations, because I think everyone involved in that conversation wants there to be better justice outcomes. That's the ultimate goal, and to have those reforms. So I think continuing those dialogues and seeing if there are also more creative ways to move towards better access to justice and justice services is the best approach.
Let me approach the two questions. Firstly, address the question regarding to resistance to change. And I know what you're talking about, since I was also working in my home country as a judge there. And I've seen in my, especially older colleagues, the pain in their face when change is coming. Either it's a technological change or legal change and everything else. So actually, cognitive scientists have shown in MR images that when change is coming and the plasticity of the brain is not functioning properly, then you can see it in the brain section responsible for pain deactivation. So it's a biological also issue, I'm afraid, and that's why we also, as I mentioned, the project Leaders for Justice is targeted especially at younger professionals who are not, as we call it, contaminated with the mindset. While it's very, very difficult, the theory of change is very difficult on persons who have a certain mindset. It's very, very difficult to change. So we are trying, and this is the scaling one, to put in the system, telling frankly, to put in the system younger and people with other mindsets that will be then agents of change in the system. So this is one of the approaches we are. So we are quite pragmatic there. No big theories about this. The second question is about local versus global. I mean, the scaling issue. And also here, I mean, we have to be pragmatic. I'm speaking not like a German, but since I'm not a German, but here we have to be pragmatic in the sense that we should start local and see where it finds. It's important that we have local ownership in this sense, that the people internalize why justice and the rule of law is important for their community. And then see further if the scales of justice are balanced in this particular society, then we can see if then this justification, justice they have in their society can be transplanted and interconnected with other bigger models. So this is my pragmatic approach to this. So we have to accept sometimes that scaling is not possible, since, for example, in the Southeast European region, which is culturally, one would say, similar, but there are still a lot of differences in the region, although it's not geographically a vast region. There are so many varieties and so many issues that are particularly for one part of the Southeast European region of importance. For others, it's not importance. And so that's the reason why we also have this Leaders for Justice program in 3 separate countries. So that's the push. It's the first phase. What's possible? So that's our mindset.
Thank you, Mahir.
Yeah. Andrew, just very briefly, 3 tough questions, or all of them are tough. I don't want to dodge them, but let me, just a couple points. First, from a donor perspective, we have to keep in mind that we are custodians or stewards of taxpayer funds. And we have to have in place the processes, the safeguards to spend that or to dispense it responsibly. So this is a lot about mindsets and methods. We still must change our mindsets on what the risk that we're able to tolerate and put in, and kind of cut the red tape also, so that we can, I think, be more innovative in the things that we support. But it's a challenge within a donor institution like it is, and I think to innovate and change within any public institution. Lastly, I do want to come on your point of we have to do better. Again, this is not necessarily new, but I do believe at this critical moment, we have to find ways of, in rethinking and reimagining how we all work, we have to find ways of following through on so-called localization and local solutions. Many donors have fallen short of their targets. So I think this is now a time to, again, bottom up, but really reinvest there, elevate the knowledge, the capacity, the talent that exists in all countries around the world. And those who are closest to the justice problem, and have them with collaboration and support work the solution.
Thank you. Well, with that, I will close this panel. It's impossible to summarize this in any way, but maybe just a few things. One, when I think what really emerges is when you talk about scale. I go back to I think it was you, Michael, who said that. Who are you scaling for? Right. Ultimately, scale means higher prevention rates, higher resolution rates. In countries, in cities, in communities, wherever. That's the measure. What comes really to the fore all the time is the importance of making the case, which in many ways the government needs to lead, but there are many ways that can be supported with data, with other ways through these other actors. The connection issue is really important across sectors within the justice sector and building the ownership. I'm glad you raised the point of the economic case, because that is not something we discussed at length, but in the end it needs to be paid somehow, and there's got to be some kind of business case. I know the Justice Action Coalition is working on a report on that, looking at you, Marcus and Claire and Maurits have been working on that, so hopefully we'll get some more wisdom on that, but that's absolutely critical, especially now in times of withdrawal of ODA and other funds. And I suppose on the global versus local, the answer is glocal, I suppose, in a way. Be pragmatic. There are some things that have to be done locally, but there are other things where a joint effort of sorts, whether it's international, regional, or whatever, could add a lot, like pooling funds in a multinational development bank. That's a really efficient way to get money to a good place, pooling certain research. So it seems to be important to figure out what can you best do at that international level and what can you best do locally. We're having this discussion at a crucial moment for scale, and at a time when, it's needed more than ever, but it's probably more difficult than ever with what's happening. So with that, I will end this seminar and hand over to you, Roseanne. Thank you very much, panelists.